You are listening to 600 Saga. Today's feature is Lock-Out by Anike Kirsten. Shadows dance where light barely shines. A shuffling lurks in the walls. We lost power the day before yesterday, and I haven't heard Baron's voice since the last transmission 4 hours after the research compound locked down. Most of the compartments have been released, but the powerhouse remains barricaded. He said it was a malfunction in the ventilation system. My cold triggered it, he joked. The shuffling follows me around. Despite the thermal suit, I'm shivering. I'm not meant for extremes like this. The South Pole of Gliese 581d is not a place to be without heat. Out in the dark of this frozen wasteland, the air is thin. It pierces my lungs with each breath. It hadn't bothered me until I left the compound early yesterday morning. I had to. The generator ran out of fuel before we could find out why the doors wouldn't open. They're stuck. Ice has formed along the seams. We had a plan, Baron and me, in case something like this happened. The shuffles along the structure's walls unnerve me. Baron? I call out at a faint shadow lurking around the corner of the boathouse. It's Maggie. I cringe. Who else would it be? We're the only 2 life forms on this forsaken planet. The ice crunches under my spiked boots. I can't feel my toes. Vibrations shooting up my legs are the only indicator I'm touching ground. I rub off a mustache of snow again. The frosted lining from a runny nose contrasts on my gray gloves. The faint yellow of a spotlight shines through the thick mist. The boathouse is one of the 3 buildings with its own power, and the last of the 3 rendezvous points in the disaster plan. He wasn't at the lighthouse or the communications tower. At least, not anymore. I found the blood trail a few meters away from the lighthouse. I followed it to the tower, where I found his pocket knife on the tainted ice after I slipped and fell from the fright of seeing my own pale brown reflection. The trail led me here. A smeared, bloodied handprint streaks down the frame and keypad. I run my hand over the pad and input my code. The door whizzes open. I step through, and the boathouse envelops me in its warmth. My skin prickles in protest, or is it in celebration? It's difficult to breathe with the change in humidity. The lights are dim. A pool of blood rests under my feet. Baron? I call out while rubbing my gloved hands together. You here? My echo responds with a here. Another shuffle sounds down the corridor. I've heard the other researchers say the planet is haunted, or inhabited according to the less superstitious. That's why we're here. Baron and I are biologists. He's the naturalist. I prefer the gritty genetic world. We've been on Gliese for 5 months and haven't found a trace of life. At least nothing that can be seen without a microscope. The shuffling moves down the pipes to the lower deck. Perhaps he's below, working on the transport pod? The research ship rests in orbit directly above, ready to take us home. We haven't heard from them in a week. The pod is our only way off. I follow the shuffles down the narrow staircase. The spiral descent worsens my nausea. My head pounds with each hard step. A sharp glint of metal catches my eye. The dying LED bulbs across the dome of the pod barely illuminates the hangar. Drops of blood along the ramp glisten under the dull light. Baron? I raise my voice. 2 echoes reply. The trail of blood ends at the pod. Smeared handprints decorate the hull. The hatch hangs open. A light inside beams across the dark hangar. I inch closer and peek into the pod. Blood spatter paints the inside. The first aid kit lies on the floor with its contents spilled out. My heart pounds, worsening my migraine. I hear a shuffle from inside the pod, followed by a guttural groan. Baron? His name skids over my tongue. The shuffle stops. A pin drops and dances on the floor into my view. A shadow looms over it, growing larger, gliding toward the hatch. You okay? I whisper, afraid that I'm wrong. Huh? Baron pokes his head out from around the corner. My muscles freeze and my throat lets out a yelp. I sigh, clutching at my chest, and shake my head. Took you long enough, Mags. He returns his attention to the long tear down his right calf. His sewing needs improvement. What happened? I ask, pointing to the bloodied leg. He looks up with raised brows and shrugs. Don't know. I was on my way to grab the beacon from the tower when something snagged my pants. It tore right through and ripped into me, but... He runs his crusted hand through his blonde hair and exhales. I couldn't see a thing. You don't think... I feel my face distort. Might be what triggered quarantine. He tilts his head back. Stupid redundancies backfired after that. He huffs through his nose. So, a fluke? I squint my eyes and look over my shoulder. The shuffles in the hangar sound louder. A shiver runs down my spine. I don't think so. His words trail off as the radio static grows louder. I turn to face him. His eyes widen. The hot red of his cheeks fade into pale porcelain. He lifts his shaking hand and slowly points over my shoulder. Mags, hurry, get in. His lips move inaudible. The shuffles drown his words. This was Lock-Out by Anike Kirsten. Born during the end of an era of institutional oppression, raised through the journey towards equity and freedom, Anike has emerged a science fiction author who writes to highlight the issues that yet plague society. She struggles with intersectionality at the hands of inequality and privilege still present in South Africa. Anike uses her writing to provide a medium through which readers can relate, reflect on, and find hope in. Check out more at her website, anikekirsten.com. Find links to her books of Beasts and Men Auriga in our show notes. Find her on Twitter or Facebook at Anike Kirsten. Check our show notes for links. Music is provided by Mads. Learn more about 600 Second Saga, our authors, how to submit your flash fiction, and how to support the podcast in the show notes. This has been Mariah Avix and 600 Second Saga.